Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin the comprehensive news analysis, a couple of important announcements and reminder. Tomorrow's class in the Target Prelims 2022 series will be on the important places in news, especially with respect to art and culture. Do join us tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. for the same, and also if you have not done so till now, do subscribe to the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS to take advantage of this free of cost crash course. Also, we have a workshop coming up for you, especially if you are preparing for the 2023 examinations. This workshop will be on 8th of May 2022 at 11 a.m., where we will be discussing what is the best way forward, how to plan your next 1 year to increase your chances of clearing the prelims examination in 2023. Now, let's come back to the important articles from the Hindu newspaper today, with the very first article being about Nepal and the economic crisis that is engulfing the country of Nepal. Now, a few months back, if you remember, we did discuss an article on the same lines, that is, how Nepal is also going through an economic crisis very similar to that of Sri Lanka. However, that article also pointed out that if situation is taken under control, we might not see as damaging effects as we have seen in Sri Lanka. And that is what the case is right now. Yes, Nepal is still going through a very tough economic times, but you should not compare it with what is happening in Sri Lanka for various reasons. That includes the fact that Sri Lanka not just has an economic crisis, they have also self-damaged their agriculture, their farming by introducing organic farming forcibly throughout the country, which has further damaged the prospects of an economic revival in Sri Lanka. With Nepal, that is not really the case. So the article says that in Nepal, if you look at the numbers, that is of the trade deficit, balance of payment deficit, the debt to GDP ratio, all of these numbers are going in the wrong direction right now. What the Nepal government needs right now is to empower their MSMEs by giving them more liquidity. Now, the problem in Nepal mainly started because of this fight between the Central Bank of Nepal and the Union government. Now, the Central Bank of Nepal says that we have been warning the Union government for a very long time, ever since the pandemic started, because most of Nepal's economy is run because it is supported by the money that comes in from tourism and the money that comes in the form of remittances. Now, because of the pandemic, both these things were cut down. A lot of people outside Nepal lost their jobs, so there were no remittances coming in, and also tourism was banned almost throughout the world, and that is why Nepal was not earning from that also. So the Central Bank of Nepal had warned the government that we need to take some action before the situation becomes worse. However, the Union government thought that this is a conspiracy by the Central Bank of Nepal to lower the popularity of the government, and that is why they did not really pay much attention. This trouble, in fact, increased further when the finance minister made sure that the governor of Nepal's central bank had to resign. Although the Nepal Supreme Court came in between and the governor of the central bank is back at his job, but the damage between the two sides, the government and the Union Bank, had been done already. The government did take a few steps in this regard. However, they did not really pay any results for the government. For example, the government of Nepal drastically banned the import of luxury goods, thinking that it would result in the foreign exchange not going outside the country. Not just this, the Nepali government also surprisingly reduced the number of working hours, but all these things have been unsuccessful and the economic decline of the country is continuing. However, thankfully, there are some positive signs if you actually see without the help of the government. For example, the one positive sign that we are seeing is that tourism very gradually is again picking up. Although there are still coronavirus cases that are coming up in nations such as China, etc., but the entire world has accepted the idea that the coronavirus is now here to stay. And that is why people are also traveling much more as compared to what they were doing about a year or a couple of years back. So tourism is picking up gradually. There are a lot more people who are applying for visa for Nepal, which is a positive sign. Now, the one interesting point of view here is what is India doing in all this regard? If you actually see Sri Lanka and Nepal, both these countries, which are our neighbors, both these countries have been going through an economic crisis. However, India's reaction and India's help has been very different. For Sri Lanka, India has been pretty helpful. We have been offering them the line of credits, we have been offering them fuel, we have been offering them all kind of support, not just one but multiple times. On the other hand, with Nepal, we have not been seen so proactive in coming out in the open and helping Nepal. Now, there can be multiple reasons for that. One, obviously, Nepal and India in the past few years have had a lot of issues, including the boundary dispute and Nepal opting to go towards the Chinese side. Secondly, we have Sri Lanka on the other hand, where the new government has tried to repair its relationship with India, and Sri Lanka is in a position where they have understood that if they depend on China, slowly but gradually they will have to cede a lot of territory to China. So Sri Lankan government's view towards India has changed drastically. With Nepal also, with the new prime minister coming in, the view is changing towards India, but gradually. So India right now is not overtly excited to help Nepal. The second thing that happened was, interestingly, if you remember, Nepal recently accepted the $500 million sum from US in the form of Millennium Challenge Corporation to upgrade its power related infrastructure. Now, there's an interesting point of view here. US and India usually are on the same page for most of the things, but this is not one of those things. India does not appreciate big countries such as US having direct relations with nations which are in our neighborhood. Because India believes that if Nepal is taking help from US, that means our influence in Nepal is reducing. So it did not really go well with India after the Nepal parliament accepted the $500 million grant from the US for its infrastructure building. That has also added to a bit of coldness between the two sides, and that is why we have not been seen too keen in coming out in the open and helping the Nepal government, although they have been asking for help. We have been much more interested in helping Sri Lanka on the other hand. And Nepal government also realizes this, and that is why the new Nepal Prime Minister Mr. Dioba had actually visited India a few weeks back. Now, when he visited India, there were multiple issues that were discussed. Let me bring your attention towards some of the issues that are still pending between India and Nepal. The first issue is about the connectivity. Now, Nepal has such a topography that it is not easy for Nepal to build transport related infrastructure, and they are a lot dependent on India for connectivity for rail and for air as well. So Mr. Dioba, Nepal Prime Minister, and the Indian Prime Minister virtually had inaugurated India Finance Kurtha Jayanagar Passenger Railway. Not just this, Nepal also wants more access to India's airports. So Nepal had requested that the new Gautam Bodh International Airport that is coming up, which is just 10 kilometers from India-Nepal border, Nepal citizens should also get free access to that so that they can also use the facilities of these airports. Now, India and Nepal have a very interesting and unfortunate connection when it comes to railways. If you remember, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India, there was a plane hijacking of IC 814. It was a large Indian plane to be hijacked. If you remember, that plane had taken off from Kathmandu and then it was forced to go to Kandahar. It also resulted in India having to release a few well known terrorists which have still not been caught. Now, when the investigation went on in that case, it was found out that the security at Nepal's Kathmandu airport was not up to the mark, and that is why the hijackers were able to take weapons on the plane. Since then, India Nepal relations, specifically when it comes to air transportation, have not been that great, and that is why we have always thought twice about giving any such privilege to Nepal. The other relation between the two countries is on the aspect of energy. Now, usually India exports energy to Nepal in the form of electricity. Last week also Nepal made a statement that we have not been getting enough electricity from India and there will be power cuts in the country because India itself does not have enough electricity right now. However, during monsoons, because they have a good supply of water, Nepal becomes an energy surplus country. And thus, during monsoons only, they are able to sell off some of the excess energy to India. That also helps Nepal in reducing their trade deficit to India, which is close to $5 billion right now. Then the two sides are also collaborating on the BBIN, that is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal Motor Vehicle Agreement, where if you remember, Bhutan has almost backed out. So Bangladesh, India, and Nepal are now working together to ensure that. So there are a lot of areas in which the two sides are collaborating. However, Nepal might not get the kind of help that Sri Lanka is getting from India due to various reasons, including the interest that US is showing in Nepal and Nepal's response to USA's grant. The next article that we have here is about the decision of the Reserve Bank of India, which was not expected by many people, to come out and increase the repo rate by 40 basis points, that is 4.4%. This was sudden, unexpected, and also resulted in kind of a shock in the stock market, while the stock market went down considerably yesterday after the announcement. It is an off-cycle increase, means it was not a meeting that was expected. It was an emergency meeting that was called by the RBI specifically for this purpose only. The RBI said that they are worried and they are concerned about the long-standing inflation numbers in the country, which is now starting to hurt the growth and stability in the country. And that is why they are increasing the repo rate. Now, I'm sure all of you have read these basics in economics. Repo rate means the rate at which banks can borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India. So let's say the SBI, State Bank of India, has to borrow money from the RBI. So they request the RBI for 100 crore rupees. RBI said, okay, we'll give you 100 crore rupees at 4% rate of interest. So SBI obviously has to make a profit. They will give this money in loan to some businessmen at, let's say, 10% rate of interest, so that they can have a 6% margin. But now that Reserve Bank of India says that now we will charge 4.4% rate of interest and not 4, SBI, if they have to retain their margin, now they have to give a loan at 10.4%. So in effect, when repo rate increases, it becomes costlier for anyone to take a loan from the bank. So if I go to SBI now, they will charge me a higher rate of interest. So getting money in the market now becomes difficult. In other words, liquidity reduces in the market. When you don't have enough money in your hand because you're not taking money from the bank, you will not buy a lot of stuff. You will not buy a lot of stuff means that demand will reduce, and that is how the inflation will reduce on paper. That is the theory behind increasing the repo rate by the RBI. Now, the reason why this is being done is mainly because of inflation in the food sector. As you know, food prices have been increasing at a very fast pace throughout the world and not just India, mainly because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Because Russia and Ukraine, both these countries amount for a big production of sunflower oil, wheat and other food grains. We have also seen how Indonesia recently announced that they are banning the export of palm oil. That has also added to food related inflation. That is why the RBI now has had to take this step, although they had resisted increasing the repo rate for a very long time. There are other negative signs also. COVID-19 is not over. There are still infections that are being seen in countries such as China. So there may still be a rude shock that might come in the few days, and that is why the RBI has taken proactive action in this particular regard to reduce inflation in the country. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware in your economic studies that these policy rates, such as the repo rate, reverse repo rate, all of these are actually announced by the MPC. MPC is Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank of India. It is a statutory body formed under Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934, with the RBI governor being the ex officio chairman. Now, the MPC is the body that determines the policy interest rate, that is the repo rate, reverse repo rate, and their aim is to achieve the inflation target. Now, the inflation target that has been set is 4%. So RBI has to set the policy rate keeping in mind that we have to achieve an inflation of 4%, and they are given a margin of plus minus 2%. So basically RBI has to remain in the vicinity of 2 to 6% of inflation. The problem now is that in the past few months, if you actually see the inflation, the CPI is going over 6% every single month, which is a big point of concern, and that is why this decision has come out from the RBI. The Monetary Policy Committee was actually an outcome of a committee that was appointed by the RBI led by Urjit Patel in 2014. I'm sure you all know what is repo rate. You all know what is reverse repo rate. Repo rate is a rate at which the banks can borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India. Reverse repo is a rate at which the RBI can borrow money from the banks because they want to reduce the money supply in the banks. Then there's also marginal standing facility, which is a window for the scheduled banks to borrow overnight money from the RBI because in the emergency situation they want more money, and that is how they can borrow it. That is called marginal standing facility because you're borrowing it in emergency, so obviously this would be more than the repo rate. The next article that we have is on a similar topic but on a very interesting point of view. The authors here again are talking about inflation and inflation control, but they are giving a different point of view here. They are saying that the RBI is correct right now by increasing the repo rate and hoping that now the inflation will come down. As we just discussed a couple of minutes back, on paper, increasing the repo rate means that the money supply in the market will reduce, the demand will come down, it will match with the supply, and then obviously the prices of the commodities will fall down. But the authors here are saying that there's a fundamental flaw here. You are reducing the demand rather than increasing the production. If you are saying that there are 100 kg tomatoes that are being demanded in the market right now, but the supply is only of 50 kg tomato, and that is why the prices are increasing, because people are demanding more, they are ready to pay higher prices. That is how the price increases. So rather than bringing the demand down to 50 kg and bringing good competition, why don't you increase the supply to 100 kg to make sure that the supply can actually match up to it? And there is good reason to do that. When you focus on increasing production rather than reducing the demand, that means you are increasing employment. You are increasing employment activities in the economy. You are bringing more tax to the government and you are keeping everyone happy. So the author here is saying that the problem is that RBI and the government of India follow the approach of the Western nations when it comes to inflation models. So all our policy decisions are based on what the European countries or what America used to do. Rather than that, our problems specifically about food inflation are different. We have to focus more on empowering the farmers to increase their production rather than bringing down the demand. And that is why the inflation policy might work on paper, but in real world, as per these authors, this policy of the Reserve Bank of India will not work. As I said earlier, as per the authors, the Reserve Bank of India's upper target of 6% inflation has been breached for 3 months consecutively, and that is why the Reserve Bank of India has now had to take this emergency meeting and increase the repo rate in the country. However, the outcome of this will be that RBI is forcing the economic activities to slow down rather than picking up the economic pace, which goes against the entire idea of generating more employment. As the article says, that by curbing the growth of non-agricultural output and curbing the growth of agricultural goods, we are actually doing it at the cost of output and employment. In order to bring more employment, we should supply more money to the supply side and ensure that the supply of agricultural products specifically increases. Now, there's also an interesting point of view that authors are bringing up. The authors are saying that the reason why RBI has not been able to control food related inflation specifically is because we are not understanding that the food patterns in India have changed considerably. If you look now in India, there is a high growth in the per capita income as compared to the last few years. Now, when a person earns more money, they order different kind of things or they eat different types of things as compared to earlier. I'll give you a very simple example. See, when we were kids in a lower middle class family, we used to eat just rice, wheat, and these kind of stuff that was made at home. Now that many of you would be earning, or many of you would be better off as compared to where you were earlier, now you are consuming other kind of things also. Might be you're consuming more dry fruits as compared to earlier. Now you're using lettuce where earlier you were using cabbage. Maybe earlier the burger that you used to have cabbage in between. And now the same burger is with lettuce in between. So you have also upgraded, right? You eat avocados, you eat other kind of stuff like zucchini. So the food patterns also have changed because of the growing per capita income. People are now more health conscious. That is why people are looking for stuff that is more rich in minerals, fruits, vegetables, more rich in protein. So there is a class of people who now say, no, I will not have paneer. Why? Because I'm lactose intolerant and I will rather have something called tofu. So this concept of things such as lactose intolerant or being vegan, etc., all these are new things which signal towards a changing consumption pattern, and that is what we have to understand, and that is what we have to make our farmers also understand. Unless we grow the stuff that is required in the market, we will never be able to match with the supply and demand. People are demanding other kind of things as compared to what we used to grow earlier. But if the farming patterns don't change, if the agriculture of the country does not change, we will never be able to match up with the demand that is in the market, and the problem of inflation will just continue to happen. The other view here is that we can't just put the blame on the union government. As per the authors, the state governments also have not been helping in this regard. Whenever there are states that produce a lot of stuff, their only concern is not to sell this cheaper into the market. Their concern is that they want to sell it to the union government at the highest possible price. So if you're selling it to the union government highest possible price, that means you are yourself increasing inflation. So that is where all the stakeholders, the Reserve Bank of India, the state governments, the center government, all of them have to come together and make sure that there is a drastic change in agricultural production patterns to ensure that our inflation related problems are curtailed. Now, agriculture is one topic on which you see questions almost every single year, and that too more than one. And that is why you read about agriculture in a lot of different places. You read about it in the newspapers, you read about it in the Kurukshetra magazine, etc. That is because the topic itself has so much to learn and understand. Let me share with you a few other insights about the agriculture sector in India and the specific productivity issues. Why is it that our production in the field of agriculture is lower as compared to the other countries? For example, 55% of our population is engaged in agriculture production, but with every generation the farm gets divided and the farm size is very low. So for example, let's say there's a farmer who has about 40 acres of land, which is a good amount of land. Now in the rural areas, because they have high productivity, let's say the farmer has 4 children. So after he goes or after he retires, he divides the land amongst the 4 children, 10 acres each. Now these farmers also, let's assume they have 4 children. So each farmer is now dividing the land in 2.5 acres each. So in just 2 generations, the land piece has become from 40 acres to 2.5 acres. The lower the farm size, the lower is the productivity, which has been seen across the world. And that is why the productivity is declining. Other factors also include the misuse of fertilizers. See, the one thing about fertilizers is that Government of India for a very long time now has been offering good number of subsidies for the fertilizers. Now when you get something at a cheaper cost, it is human nature to use it in much more quantity as compared to what is required. So a lot of our soil has become so redundant with agriculture that it is actually hurting whatever crops that we are growing. So there are poor cropping practices, the soil is not getting the nutrition that it requires, and that is why the productivity is also declining. Similar is the case with the use of water. In most of the states, the farmers, because they don't have to pay electricity bill for drawing out water from underground, they are drawing out much more water as compared to what they require, which is number one, depleting the groundwater, and second, also making their soil alkaline. That also adds to the problem. Then the erratic rainfall that we are seeing in the past few years, all of this together is making up the agriculture problem a big problem that has to be solved before it becomes a major crisis. So there are land reforms needed in the country, just that they have to be introduced after talking to all the stakeholders, after conducting scientific study, bringing everyone into confidence, and then implementing them. The next article is on the GST compensation issue. Now, we have discussed this multiple times how the state governments in India constantly keep on complaining that they are not getting their due from the central government under the GST law. Now, let me refresh your memory very quickly. When the GST law was introduced in 2017, many state governments were not in support of it. Many state governments said that before GST we were earning more taxes. For example, let's say West Bengal said that before GST we used to earn 40,000 crore rupees in taxes every year. Under GST, what if we only earn 30,000 crore? Then what will happen? So Government of India had said that for the first 5 years, whatever is your shortfall, that on an average, let's say you used to earn 40,000, now under GST you are getting only 30,000. So whatever your shortfall is, let's say 10,000 crore, we will give it to you for the first 5 years. After this, you can continue on your own. And the states had agreed to it. Also, this figure, that how much the states were earning earlier, was to be calculated by seeing how much the states earned in 2015 and increasing it every year by 14%. So the states were happy that okay, for the first 5 years we'll get the money and it will be good enough. But now that the 5 years are coming to an end, the states are getting a reality check because of various reasons. Number one, earlier it was agreed that this process will continue for 5 years only because it was hoped that after 5 years, due to GST, the revenue will increase and the states anyways will have more money. Secondly, the states had expected that because this is a constitutional guarantee, the union government will give them compensation in time, which has not been happening. The union government is giving this compensation money to the state governments in a very delayed manner. And that is why the state governments are very unhappy. So much so that the finance ministry had announced that we are still to pay 78,704 crore rupees to the states in the form of GST compensation. So there's a lot of money that the union government still owes to the state governments. And to make the situation worse, in the recent meeting with the chief minister, as we discussed, the prime minister pointed out towards some states asking them to reduce their VAT on the fuel, and said that if they don't do this, this will be injustice to their people living in the state. That is why the opposition state led by West Bengal have hit back and said that if you give us the money that you actually owe us, maybe we will reduce the tax on fuel. So neither you are giving us the money that is ours. On the other hand, you're also asking us to reduce the taxes. This is not how we can work. And that is why this article has been written here. One of the problems that actually happened in the GST compensation was the pandemic time. Because when the pandemic happened, the government obviously did not earn a lot of money from the GST. And that is why the government at the union level said, how can we pay you compensation if we ourselves don't have enough money? Eventually, the central government had to take loan from outside to pay money to the state governments in the form of GST compensation. Now, just to give you an idea, how does the union government get this money? This money is in the form of GST compensation cess. Actually, what the government of India had done was they had thought that for 5 years, because for 5 years only we have to pay extra money to the states, for 5 years we will impose a cess called GST compensation cess on sin goods. What are sin goods? Sin goods are mainly those goods which are harmful to the health. So tobacco, cigarettes, alcohol, these are the goods on which government usually imposes higher tax. That is called a sin good. So the government had thought that for the first 5 years we will impose GST compensation cess on the sin goods, and the money that we get from that we will transfer to the state governments for compensation. But now the government has announced that we will continue the cess on the sin goods for 5 more years. Why? Not to pay more money to the states, but to pay back the loans that we have taken from outside during the pandemic to pay the money to the states. So although the cess on the sin goods will continue, the money will now not go to the state governments. It will now be with the center government to repay the taxes that they had taken from outside. Now, this was in the month of March where the finance ministry had presented a reply in the Rajya Sabha where they were asked how much money do they still owe to the state governments. So they told how much money they owe to Maharashtra, UP, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Delhi. These are the states mainly that have been suffering because of a lower tax collection as compared to the pre-GST era, because these are mainly manufacturing states. Except UP, if you see the other states, these are the states where a lot of manufacturing activity used to happen. Earlier, these states used to impose excise duty on anything that was manufactured. Now they can't put it, and they have to be satisfied with whatever money that they're earning in the form of GST. Also, if you compare the numbers of 2020-21 and 21-22, the money that the union government had to pay to the states in the form of compensation also has increased considerably. In this financial year 2021-22, union governments had to pay to the states almost 2.7 lakh crore rupees in the form of compensation. And they thought that they will get this money from the cess on sin goods. But from the cess, they could only get this much money, 1.11 lakh crore. So from where will they get the remaining money? They had to borrow it from the market. And this borrowing that they had done, this huge borrowing of 1.58 lakh crore, this they will have to pay back by putting cess on the sin goods for 5 more years. So that is the entire cycle that you have to understand. One more interesting part that was noted here is it was on the day of Prime Minister's meeting with the chief ministers only. When he said that you should reduce your VAT on the fuels, it was on that day only that the finance ministry has said that we are still to pay more than 78,000 crore rupees to the states. So it was a very unfortunate coincidence that on the same day where you are saying that we have to pay so much money to the state governments, on the same day you are asking the state governments to cut down on your taxes. So very unfortunate coincidence. The next article is about the pardoning powers with the governor of the state and with the president of India. I am sure all of you would have read about the pardoning powers given to the president under Article 72 and pardoning powers of the governor under Article 161 of the Indian Constitution. Now, in very simple terms, the issue is that there is a convict in Rajiv Gandhi assassination case called A.G. Perarivalan, who has been in the jail in Tamil Nadu for 30 years. Now, what happened was in 2018, he had sent a mercy petition to the governor of Tamil Nadu. And governor of Tamil Nadu, because they have to decide on the mercy petition, on the advice given by their Council of Ministers only. The governor asked the government of Tamil Nadu, what do you think? The government of Tamil Nadu had advised to the governor that you should pardon the person. He has already served 30 years. He has shown very good conduct. He has even earned educational qualifications. So now you have to let him go. But the governor did not take any action for a long time. After that, after more than 2 years, what the governor did was he actually referred the matter to the President of India. Just like he can send a bill to the President of India for his consideration, the governor of Tamil Nadu thought, let me also send this matter to the President of India. Now, this is the question in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is angry, and the judges are saying that under Article 161, governor has to decide on the mercy petition on the advice of the Council of Ministers. The governor cannot send this matter to the President of India. That is not allowed. So that is why we will decide now what to do. The union government said to the Supreme Court, sir, please wait. Let the president first take a call whether to give him pardon or not. Then you can decide whatever you have to. So the judges became very angry. They said that the question is not whether or not president decides to pardon them or not. The question is whether the governor had the right to actually send this to the President of India or not. So we are questioning how did the governor send it to the president. So please don't interfere in our matters. In fact, the Supreme Court very strongly said that it is our responsibility to interpret the law and not the president's responsibility to interpret the law. So we will decide whether as per the law the governor can send this petition to the president or not. The Supreme Court said that the center government also has had over 1 year on this mercy petition, and the matter is now with us and we will decide what action has to be taken here. The Supreme Court has said that there is no role for the president here under the constitution. The governor had no authority to transfer the mercy plea to the President of India. It is the governor who had to decide this as per the advice of his own Council of Ministers. Now, this power of pardoning with the governor and the president that is given as per the constitution is something that is constantly a part of our news every few months. A few months back, there was another very interesting judgment by the Supreme Court, which I would like to remind you of here, in which the Supreme Court had said that the governor's power to pardon overrides the section 433A of the CRPC. Now, what exactly is this code 433A and what happened here? Now, as per the Code of Criminal Procedure section 433A, a governor can only pardon a person from the jail term after the prisoner has remained in jail for at least 14 years, 1-4. So what happened was that the governor had given a pardon to a person who had been in jail for less than 14 years, and that is when the matter had gone to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had said that the governor's power to pardon is more than this section 433A. So governor can pardon a prisoner even before he has served for 14 years in the jail. Section 433A states that when a sentence of imprisonment for life is imposed on the conviction of a person for an offence for which death is one of the punishments provided by law, then commutation will only and only happen if the person has served for at least 14 years in imprisonment. But Supreme Court has said the governor can pardon the person even before 14 years as well. So in simple terms, the section says that for a crime, if the person could have been given a death sentence also, but has only been given the life imprisonment, then the governor can pardon his sentence only after he has served at least 14 years. So not before 14, which the court did not agree to. The court said that it is a sovereign power of the governor to pardon a prisoner under Article 161, and this goes over and above section 433A. Now the interesting part is there is one more section of the CRPC called section 432. Section 432 actually allows the state government to frame a policy under which remissions can be granted to people who are serving a jail term. The court had said that if someone is being remitted under section 433, then the state government can do that without even asking the governor. But if you are talking about section 433A and you are talking about article 161, that is the governor's power to give pardon, then the governor does not have to wait for the 14-year jail term to get over. These were the articles we wanted to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number 1. Write a short note on the pardoning powers of the governor of a state in India and draw comparison with the pardoning powers given to the President of India. Second, what is GST compensation says? Does a demand by the state governments to extend GST compensation by 5 more years have merit? Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.